So we've got our pocket backs here, making sure the right side is facing up. This is the side seam. You've got notches here and here. And we'll be placing one of the pockets down here. You've got matching, corresponding notches that will match up here. So we'll pin that on there. We'll be sewing along that in its entirety. So matching your notches and pinning. Your notches. So although the pockets on this are optional, these pockets are a really good example of how you can put a pocket into any side seam. So if you ever want to add a pocket to something that doesn't have a side seam, you can use this pattern piece, that does have a side seam, sorry, you can use this pattern piece to create the pocket. It's a pocket is a pocket, doesn't matter. If you're adding it to a side seam, it doesn't matter what, you know, this is a good sort of generic pocket shape is what I'm saying. This is the front pattern piece, front trouser. Again, you are matching right sides together and matching up these notches and pinning in place. If you want to, you can put a third pin in, but for this length of seam it's not really necessary, but if it helps you, it helps you. So make sure that everything is right sides together. It's very easy at this point if your fabric is not directional, not easy to tell which side is which, to pin the pocket the wrong way around. And it's really important that you have all your pockets the right way around. Obviously the bag part, the lower bit, hangs down towards the bottom of the trouser. So I've got a normal straight stitch on here. I'm going to sew all 4 of these with a 1 centimetre seam allowance. And the stitch length, I've got 2.5 stitch length on my machine. So the normal stitch length that you would use for dressmaking. I'm going to do all 4 of these. I'm not going to show you film it because you're just doing the same on every single one. We're going to press these seams towards the pocket. So after I've stitched all 4 of them, I will be pressing the seams towards the pocket, and then I'll show you the flat stitching, as they call it in Style Arc, or the understitching as we would normally call it. So I have pressed all the seams towards the pockets. You understitch all your pockets. You might just want to zigzag from the pocket down. So just changing to a zigzag stitch, keep the edge of the fabric in the middle, and if you use a large zigzag stitch, it will zigzag, go into fabric, into nothing, and wrap around that edge and stop everything from fraying. It means you can wash and wear your clothes without worrying that they're going to fray or fall apart. What we're going to do is understitch. So in the pattern it calls it flat stitching, and what you're doing is you're stitching your seam allowances to the pocket. So there's no stitching that will be shown on the right side of the garment. And what understitching does, it helps the seams roll to the inside and stops the the pocket being seen from the outside of your trousers, so you don't want your pockets kind of coming through to the side seam so people can see them. Your pockets are there for you. They're your own private little pockets. They're not for public view. And that's what understitching does. So this is the pocket, the right side of the fabric. So what will happen is when this pocket is finished, it will be folded to the inside towards the front of the trouser leg, and that just helps that seam just roll to the inside and be hidden. So on the right side of the fabric, the stitch line is just on the pocket side. You want to make sure before you do your understitching that all your seams are well pressed and that you've not got anything folded over towards the fabric. So it's just a really sort of neat finish. We'll do this on all 4 pockets, and then I will come back and show you how to sew your side seam. Okay, so now what we want to do is sew the side seams. So this is where you want to place your back, right side facing up, and then get your front piece, which is the narrower of the 2 trouser legs, and place this over the back so that the right sides of the fabric are facing. We're then going to pin this seam matching any notches. So we're making sure our pockets line up nicely. Pinning here. When you pin at the top of your pockets, make sure that your pin goes in through both layers and that you are pinning just the trouser, not the pocket, because that will help you kind of, where I've pinned this, I have pinned so that the pin goes in just on the trouser side of that seam line, and that it comes out just on the trouser side of that seam line. Just helps you when you're sewing that, keep those pockets hidden to the inside, which is what we want to achieve. You don't want your pockets on display. So again, the same on that one, and just a few pins around your pocket to hold that all together. And then there was another notch a little bit further down here. We'll make sure that matches up, keeping these edges all together, and then coming down and and pinning the remainder of this side seam. So you've got that little kick out at the bottom for your hem. You will want to stick to your seam allowance there as you sew it. And I tend to pin sort of hand space apart, unless you've got anything specific that you need to mark. So pin your notches, pin your top and bottom, and then sort of space your pins in between that. So we've pinned one side seam, I'm going to pin the second. Both the seams are pinned and ready to sew. We are just going to sew these with a 3/8 or 1 centimetre seam allowance as per the rest of the pattern. So just a few stitches in reverse to start with, and we're coming straight down. You may notice I've changed the colour of my thread to a much better match. And here on the edge of your pocket, you just want to come down just to the left hand side of that original row of stitching. You want to finish your stitch where that pin comes, that pin is, the pin goes in. So once you've done that, needle down, lift your presser foot, pivot, and we're going to sew around the pocket now. So again, 3/8 seam allowance. Work your way around that curve. I know curves can be tricky when you're just starting out, but just work with it, work your way around. And we come in then to just come over the seam and finish just on the trouser side of that pocket seam. Lift your presser foot, pivot, and we're coming down to finish the rest of this seam with your 3/8 1 centimetre seam allowance. So you can do this for any pocket. Make sure your raw edges match up. Stop and start as often as you need to. Whenever you stop, try and stop with your needle down in the fabric or turn it down. Press your down button if you've got a down button. These machines don't, but if you've got a computerized one, you may have that needle down button. Okay, so when you get to this bottom edge where you've got this little kickback, you want to put your needle in and pivot and come down and finish that lower edge of the seam. Back tack. And now I'm going to sew the second side seam. So now I'm changing to my zigzag stitch. So just keep the stitch length as 2.5. The zigzag width, I keep it on full width, and I've just changed to a C, which is a zigzag stitch on this machine. So, raw edge of the fabric in the centre of the presser foot, and then you just start sewing. So your zigzag stitch goes into fabric, into nothing, into fabric, into nothing. So we're just going to pivot on this corner here and come around the edge of the pocket. So that's why we zigzagged that edge first, because you can't get to it now that it's sewn into the pocket. You may notice that your pocket edges are not fraying as much as other edges, but that's because much of the pocket is cut on the bias, so it would potentially stretch out. But cutting on the bias also means that it doesn't fray in the same way, because of the way the weave is created. So that's why we use bias binding. You know, you'll notice on a bias binding your edges don't fray, even though they've not been finished in any way. go. So zigzagged all the way down there. You can then cut these frayed bits off if they bother you, and just that will stop it from fraying. So I'm going to zigzag the other leg now. I'm going to press these seams towards the back leg, but what I'm going to do is press the pocket towards the front, and when you do that, that can create some slight issues with the seam here. So what we're going to do is just clip into this bit here, just release that, so we're just clipping at a 45-degree angle into that corner where the pockets join, so that that seam can then go towards the back and the pocket can go towards the front. In fact, you don't need to do it all the way into the pocket edge. You can just do it just below the pocket. There we go. And pressing that towards the back, pressing the pocket towards the front and the seams towards the back. Okay, so I've changed my zigzag width here to about 2.5. It's on a zigzag stitch, and I'm on about 0.2 on the stitch length. So I've positioned this just about a centimetre away from the seam and just at the top of the pocket. So what's going to happen is I'm going to do a bar tack. A bar tack is a row of zigzags that will reinforce and strengthen the top and bottom of the pocket openings, so that you don't get any breakages in your seams or whatever. So if you just look at that, so that's the bar tack on the top edge there. I'm going to do the lower edge now. So I've left long thread tails at the beginning and end because I'll use a needle and I'll thread those through to the back and knot them. So again, we're finding the pocket bottom, the bottom of the pocket opening, the pocket bottom, and about a centimetre away from that, just lining up where we're stitching, and then coming forward until we get to the seam. So this is stitched on the front of the trouser where the pocket is sitting, and you can see that there. Top and bottom of your pocket. Just got a hand sewing needle here. Take one of the thread tails and thread that through. And then on the reverse you can tie yourself a strong knot. So at least a double knot. Then once you've done that, you can trim your threads off. So repeat that for all your bar tacks, and that is your pockets finished. Remember to like and subscribe to my channel for more great Learn to Sew videos that will help make you a better dressmaker.